This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it is time for How to Super Age with Elise Marie Collins. And Elise, it's so good to have you back on. I know we've taken a couple of weeks off. I think that's because we're super aging, right?
That's right. We've been super aging daily. We're going to hear more about it today. I can't wait.
So who's your guest today?
Today, I have Maria Berry, and she is the founder of Dash Learning. She's a parent and student mentor and coach. And we're going to talk about a few things. One of my interests is neuroplasticity. And she works with kids and she wants to really uplift the youth. And I am really curious about how, her take on neuroplasticity, because we need it at every age and stage. And the thing that's so interesting is, to me, one of the things that's interesting about neuroplasticity is that only about 20 years ago, approximately 20 years ago, it was realized and discovered that we had the capacity to build more neurons in our brain. So that means when I was growing up, people didn't even know that was an option or that was a thing. It was just like your capacity, your number of neurons is just fixed, and then you can't change it, nothing you can do. And that has completely changed. But I think we still have part of our mindset is in the past, where we have a fixed number of brain cells, literally brain cells, but we can expand them at any age, including when we're young, when we're middle-aged, when we're older, at any age. So I'm going to just say, before we start, I'm just going to show you guys this is my more tattered copy of my book, Chakratonics, and I've been revising this. I was really excited to get an email from my publisher earlier this year. It's already April, but I got an email that they were going to reissue this book, a new edition. And I completed this book back in 2006. So talk about youth. That was when I remember writing this book. My son was in kindergarten. And I remember I was really tired because I was staying up late writing it. And then, how kids, they're awake and they're alert. And I was like, come back from kindergarten, I'd be falling asleep on the couch. Anyway, hopefully that didn't do anything to his brain cells. So Maria, tell us a little bit about what you do and Dash Learning. I know that one of the things Maria does is she puts on these incredible, they're kind of like maybe at least once a month, she puts on these seminars, and they're for anyone. I've attended them. They're on speed reading, speed math. And she just did one last weekend. Tell us a little bit more about those seminars. And the one you did last week was on emotional intelligence.
Thank you so much, Elise, for having me here. It's so good to meet you, and it's good to meet you as well. I'm so sorry. I forgot your name.
I'm Karen, but that's okay.
Karen, please forgive me. Thank you so much for having me here. And yes, I really think it's important to work on ourselves so that we can be the example. And that's where also emotional intelligence comes in. And I've been blessed to collaborate with the world's fastest reader, still holding the Guinness Book of World Record for being the world's fastest reader, Howard Berg, and we're part of the Rotary Club. So we're doing as much as we can to empower parents and parenting skills. Not to say that parents do not have the ability, but I think together we accomplish so much more. So the goal is for us to understand it's not what we say so much that children listen to or emulate. It's what we do. We lead by example. The words, they don't see. The action, they see. And children, we're all visual, but children, and they're looking from a lower perspective in terms of physically lower points, So I tend to get down on the floor with my children and my students. I get to their level because you see from their perspective. And when you can begin to see from a person's vantage point, you relate much better. And part of the reason why I also do this, because I reflect on my own childhood, having, varying levels of, situations that has occurred, whether it's through the educational process, coming into a new country, learning the system here, my personal experience of not just abandonment, but kidnapping as a young child, that has helped to shape me. And in that shaping, my relentless perseverance or pursuit is to ensure that children will be seen and heard. Back home, they have a saying, children must be seen and not heard. It's proper manners. But we need to hear. They have a mind, they have a thought. Listen, because if we're listening, we will help them to become more conscious and more self-reliant on who they are, because they are young human beings growing up to be adult human beings. And we can't train the adult. We can try to, but between 0 and 7, 8 years old, that's when we have to put the work in and continue to work on it. Be the good example, be the trendsetter. And so when you talk about emotional intelligence, Elise, it goes right back to that. Because if we can't control how we handle situations and our children are looking along, what do you think they're going to do? And then we, the adults, we talk about, the children of today, they have no manners. Where do you think they got it from?
Right.
No? So I know I was a bit lengthy, but it's what we do. It's what we say. We are the trendsetters. We are the example. And my thought pattern is this: we are raising those students to be the world changers of tomorrow. And we want great world changers. So hope that answered it. I mean, it was lengthy, but
yes.
Absolutely. No, there was so much. You packed in a lot there. So I have a couple questions, but you also mentioned, I know you grew up in Jamaica. Is that right?
I'm from Jamaica, and I grew up partially in Jamaica and then partially here. But again, when you have West Indian background, West Indian parenting, they will remind you constantly, and you know that you're here. They'll tell you, let me phrase it the Jamaican way. You're in America, but you're not from America, right? Mm-hmm. So your culture still remain with you. The principles you learn, it still stays with you. So don't become what you're seeing from the outside. Some parents have a thing which it might sound like a joke, but they do it. I have a friend that her father did that with her. And, family unit is big. I may have had my personal experience, but part of the whole culture itself, the family ties, right? Grandparents, great-grand, auntie, uncle. Why I say that: you misbehave and you will get a wonderful summer vacation. Right. Get the point? Yeah. Yeah, the discipline will come back. So when you come back to America, so the discipline is important in everything. Yeah. So here in America, they say nerd is something that is condescending to an intelligent person. But back home, you don't call an intelligent person a nerd. You strive to be around the people who are growing, and you expect to be that, Anyway, I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, that again,
more than
so many things. Nerd. Yeah, I think at one point it had a more negative, at least in the Bay Area, which is more like the tech center. Nerd is more like a positive, and it used to be more negative. And I think, but you also touched upon something I never heard, but I don't want to bring up. It sounds painful and unpleasant, but I just want to address it because you said you were kidnapped, and I didn't know anything about that. So you don't maybe want to go into the details. It doesn't sound fun, but yeah, you're smiling. So hopefully, tell us, if you would, just how that maybe influenced you. That sounds like it was something formative that informs your work right now.
Yes. Yes, it has shaped me quite a bit. I am naturally an introvert and a shy person, but I work on myself. So what I do, I'm skilled at it, because if I'm not confident about what I'm doing or saying, you'll not see me. I'll be the one in the background hiding somewhere. You won't find me. So self-talk works quite a bit. Talking about the kidnapping, it's something that for time, I spent quite a long time hiding, and somehow everything that I do, I'm in the forefront, but I still do not want to. And I remember as a teenager, even in high school here, I was chosen as one of the kids to speak on, it was a television thing. And I literally masked my, self in such a way that they wouldn't see me, because I was still walking with that fear of something that happened at 6 years old that, because I was always told, never tell your name, never give anybody your identity. If somebody talks to you, make sure you go the opposite way. I'm always avoiding people. I personally, and when it happened, I did not realize that it was my father who was involved with it. So I'm saying that, and I'm saying that from a healing perspective, but I understand what happened with children and how children can be silenced. Mm-hmm. So the kidnapping, I was involved in it, where luckily for my grandmother, she caught me, threw me to a neighbor who, back home you have multiple exits from home. So she threw me out of her bedroom back door. The neighbor caught me, and that's how I got away. But I watched my 3 brothers being taken away, and it was not pleasant. Mm. And from then on, I was in hiding. Mm. From then on, I did not see my brothers. Mm. So in researching and investigating, I realized it's not just me. There are many children that live a life of quiet desperation. And you see it in their behavior. You see certain things, and you don't know why. And unless we get to the point of wanting to hear from the child, and teaching for me is so important, because it's not just being classroom. And I'm going to tie it into this, because you'll find a child who comes to class and you wonder why the child is always sleeping. You're lazy. Why do you talk back? But what I've also experienced, and I chose to work in school districts where there are challenges as well, what I've come to realize, that 6-year-old who is in first grade is dropping off the younger one to kindergarten, feeding them, being the parent, because the parent is either not available, working 2 or 3 jobs, or maybe on drugs, whatever the situation might be. And that child is, and then hearing an adult reprimanding or speaking to them as if they're the equal. And they do the younger sibling work with them to get homework, meals, everything done. They come to school, they're tired. And they're listening to an adult say, you need to be respectful. They have no respect for adults. Because you're telling me I need to be respectful, but you have not been the one that is showing me leading by example. So, and I say it because I've spoken to students, little ones, and you hear them and you see the pain in their eyes. And if you can get to that point of understanding, then education can be different.
Yeah.
So.
Wow, that was a lot. First of all, thank you for sharing the story about the kidnapping. My heart goes out to you and your brothers. Have you ever been reunited with your brothers, or are you connected with them?
We were reunited in our late teenage years, and I begged my mom, and that's how we actually researched. And my eldest brother, which became that's the person that was always the one that, as young as he was, has always been the one to be the leader of the family as well, because there's more to the story. And he ended up being robbed and was murdered. So I I had to do my brother's eulogy in my early 20s. Here I am doing, he was in the United States military, went in at 17. And and then there's another one that was in the military. He's in Jamaica, but somewhere in my head, I believe that something has happened because over the past 2 years, he has just fallen off the radar. And the other brother, he is doing well. It has caused a lot of dysfunction, but he's doing well. He's a PhD, doing quite well, educator and so forth. So out of adversity, there lies a seed of a bigger or greater benefit. So healing has happened, and I don't cry anymore. I use it. It's empowered me to give back. And like Henry Ford says, if you think you can, you can.
Yeah.
So I always, like the little engine, I know I can, and I empower others to let them know that you can, So I hope that did answer you in a roundabout way, without too much detail.
Oh, that was, thank you. I just, again, it's a heart-wrenching and heart-opening story. And thank you for sharing it. I think you've done a lot of healing, and I'm sure you bring that to children, to parents. There was a few things I wanted to ask about. We haven't even talked about neuroplasticity, but this is part of it too, though, because trauma,
yes.
If we experience trauma, it's hard, that's very hard on the brain. So actually, let's just ask that as a question. Yes. What do you know about trauma and neuroplasticity? Because we could get it when we're children, and then that affects us in all stages, and especially children. So I think it's much more powerful to take care of trauma earlier if possible. So I love that what you're doing is helping, the children are going to age to be, and they're going to live a lot longer. And if they're living with that trauma, that's going to cause a lot of mental and physical health issues. So how can we, tell us a little bit about neuroplasticity and trauma.
I will say this, the phrase of our brains are designed to absorb information, and it's designed to solve complex issues. And notice the key word is to solve. We're not walking into the pain. We are relinquishing the pain. And the way we do that, we make different connections. And no matter what age you are, and you said it earlier, Elise, older, middle, younger, make new connections, not one time, but the constant connections that we make. As we read, we figure things out. As we crochet, we sew, we garden, we bake, do it repetition. Theory is great. Practical is dynamic. The brain connects with the two hands, and everything we do is not with the 2 feet. If we have amputation or whatever, we're born without, we learn, our intelligence will direct us in different paths. So I'm not neglecting those people who are experiencing that, but the limbs are necessary. But the hands, if you notice, our hands play a significant role in everything we do. I'm animated when I talk.
Yeah, I love it. I also like handwriting. I don't know how you think about that as an educator, but I love handwriting. Yes. She's nodding. Oh. I love handwriting because it's supposed to be such a break. I know, I'll show you pens and papers.
This is purposeful because I've gotten into the thing with the phone and the computer constantly typing, and you lose neuroplasticity, your penmanship. Yeah. Their children right now, and I didn't mean to cut you off, I'm sorry, but that's triggered because they're children that are not learning to write. They're not understanding penmanship and good penmanship, right? Because everything is the computer and the thumb. Yeah. Not even the phalanges, forget it. None of these are working. It's the thumb on the phone constant. So what's happening here? Arthritis, you think maybe later? right?
Oh,
Absolutely.
absolutely. Yep.
Yeah. So there's going to be so much that communication, right? When you're writing, you're using your brain is connecting other neurons.
Mhm.
But if we're shutting it down and saying, okay, technology is great, but if we're shutting all these things down, what are we creating? What's tomorrow going to look like?
Yeah, so interesting. And another thing that I heard you say earlier, speaking about community, how important community is, and at every stage. And I also heard that your grandmother saved you, rescued you. We need all the generations. You know, we live far away. We were just talking, Karen and I, before, how her son has just moved 6 hours away. Luckily, right now I live close to my son, but yeah, our families are spread out. We don't have that connection of generations, and we really do need that, I think. And that's why I love that you're working with parents, parent coaches, maybe some, or you're coaching parents, because you know, we think about school too. And I noticed this because I used to teach kids yoga. The kids are in school, and then they're going home. So the home environment, sometimes there is not, it's not the best environment. Like you were saying, some kids are experiencing difficulties at home, but the more you can support the parents and their growth and their upliftment, and then support them at school, we need all those things. We need that community. So I I wanted to see if there's anything else to say about that, like how can we do that? And from grandparents, from parents, people that listen to the show are all ages. How can we support the youth? How can you coach us today?
There's so much. That's a loaded question,
Okay,
Elise.
the Reader's Digest version.
How can we support the youth? We have to recognize, first of all, I always look at myself, and we think about ourselves a lot, but there's no difference between you and me. We have to look at each other, recognize that there is no difference. Even from the youth, it starts before the youth. And that's why I said it's so loaded, because we could take it in so many ways. I prefer to think from the womb, what you do, the child can hear. Mm-hmm. The conversations, read aloud, they hear. When they come out of the womb, they are learning language and they're learning actions. They're seeing everything you do. So they're following what you do, right? They're listening to language. So if you speak sophisticated language, they're going to understand that. I am one that I call myself ambitiously lazy. Why? I don't believe in baby talk. Mm-hmm. Do it once, do it right. It won't be perfect. You get it right once, you won't have to teach the child the vocabulary word when they're a teenager to get them ready for SATs. They will already have it. You speak and allow them to also lead. So by your leadership, you're empowering them. That's one of the things I love to do with Dash. It's empower them to let them be on the board. Let them be the secretary. Let them be the one to lead the meeting. You officiate, they lead. So they give feedback. And this starts at that very early age. Never mind the language. Oh, they know what they're saying. It may not be as eloquent as the adult, but we allow them from that stage. Empower, encourage, influence positively, and they will be motivated to take the harness and run. And when a child misbehaves, some children, they say that children are misbehaving. That's leadership. When they want to take the forefront, that's leadership. We reprimand. What I think we should do, rather than reprimanding and say, sit down, be quiet. No, come. That's what I do with my students. Help me. I want you to be my helper. Can you help me to keep this classroom in order? Help me to get them to be quiet and get the work done. Oh, Miss Berry, he's not doing, and you need to listen to Miss Berry. You need to listen to what she's saying. Suddenly, That's the child that was disruptive and giving the problem, became the one that is now saying, we need to listen, we need to do. And they didn't even realize because you didn't say, don't do.
Ooh,
And
that
they're
was
usually the
powerful.
children that we leave behind, and we should be bringing them forward.
Yes.
Yeah. Well said. Well said. And it reminds me of when I was teaching kids yoga. I haven't been teaching it since the pandemic. I used to teach in person. I taught a little bit online. But one of the things I noticed is that, well, the parents that I work with, because they were taking their kids specifically to a yoga class, you know, it wasn't part of a school, it was part of a yoga studio. And there was, I don't know what to call it, but more like a kind of a pressure, like, is this yoga class, is my child above it or beyond it? You know, there was like a hierarchy, and that's not what yoga is about. Like you said, I am you, you are me. There's no difference. And that's what yoga teaches you. It's union. So I'm just saying these things, maybe I'll have comments, but what I would do with the kids is there'd be really young kids, like 3 or 4, and they could barely do a yoga class. Sometimes they'd just be staring at everybody, or, you know, I never forced them to do a pose or do anything. And then there was older kids, but the way I brought them on is exactly what you said. I'd have them teach the class. There was a girl that she used to be like, okay, now we're going to meditate. She'd be like, she'd get really serious and she'd put her hands in the position and stiff, and she would tell everybody how to do it. And so I really like working with kids in that way, never saying like, oh, this class is only for babies. Cause they, you know, they get that thing. That's what it is. It's like, this is babies. I'm cool. And that's what's out there in the world, where there's this bad and good, instead of like, we're all connected. So I love that you talked about bringing that to classrooms where there's kids that are supposedly disruptive, and making them the leaders. Cause I found that was so helpful and valuable. So I don't know if you saw that, or if you have any thoughts about that kind of idea, like my child needs to go into, you know, the higher, like sometimes they do need more stimulation, but that thing where I think kids can be mentors to younger kids, and not thinking of like, now I'm beyond that stage.
Yeah. Awesome thought, Elise. Love it. Yes. In teaching our children how to be great leaders, there's a balance. It's not a better than. It's not, look at me, I can and you cannot.
Yeah.
It's allowing children to take turns, you know, giving them the opportunity. So you have a classroom, and you may want, like I mentioned with the allegedly misbehaved child, you use that one first, but then every week, or, you know, you set a schedule where everybody gets an opportunity to lead. Everybody gets an opportunity to be a mentor. Children learn more when they teach what they learn. Adults learn more when they teach what they learn. It's like this light bulb just goes off in your head, and you're like, woo, I'm teaching it, but now it's really making so much more sense. I love the science projects. I love doing them with my students, because when you're going through it, for me, I'm learning and recognizing that our language only became more sophisticated, but the task never changed. Anybody could be a doctor if that's their mindset. The language, but the task does not change. And really, I tell my own children, that's what I've taught them. You lead by example. You can be the example to those younger, and those your age, and those older. And listening is key. You know, I remember my mother always said, God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. It's important. We listen more, we have less to say, and that's learning, and know how to edify, encourage, motivate, uplift. Visual is important. You know, speak what you want, not what you don't want. So I use the mirror, for example, when I see my children not not my personal, but even I call them all my children, right? But my personal ones and the others, I have sat with them. I give like free summer like classes. I pull them all together. I don't charge the parents because they need this. Look in the mirror and tell yourself, I'm great. I'm beautiful. I love myself. I'm a winner. I am the can-do kid. It doesn't matter what it looks like. I can get beyond this. I can change. And you know, that's those are the things that we want to do. I'm so sorry, Chef, turn that off. Yeah, that's the things that we want to do to empower our children to know that they are greatness. They don't have to be famous because fame doesn't make you great.
You know, it's interesting that this conversation is so important today because as adults, we're still trying to find our voice. We're still trying to find our way. We want to fit in. And with all the coaches that we've had on Avoid the Maze, one of the things I'm learning is that because we didn't have our voices when we were younger, we think that we aren't allowed to have a voice today. And if as parents, we can allow our children to speak up and guide them when their words may be incorrect or not in the right framing, they can learn so much more. And, you know, I am so excited with what you're doing. I think we need more teachers, more parents to be involved in, you know, incorporating this into our lives. So as one person, how do you think we can make this even bigger?
I love that question. That's a powerful question. How can we make this even bigger? And that's a dominant thought in my mind every day as I shape and reframe. And I believe everything happens through duplication. So it's not about Maria. It is never about Maria and what Maria does. If I can duplicate my mindset and what we're doing in the children, in the adults, because one person can't reach the globe.
Right.
But through duplication, the similar mindsets, we can reach every person in the corner of the world. We may start on the computer. It's going to end up in the most remotest part of the world, not on the computer, but by somebody who is here, hearing, understanding the mission, understanding the purpose, duplicating it, taking it off, speaking to the community, a community teacher, leader, child, sharing it with there. And before you know it, it's in every corner. It's through duplication. And I love to explain what I mean when I say duplication, because there is one of me, but me knowing Elise, and Elise knows you, we have two, we have three, right?
Right.
So we double. So when we go to the doubling process, we go from doubling to 2 to 4 to 8 to 16 to 64. And this happens in a day if we understand the process. Love the question.
Thank you.
Yeah, I love that. And we haven't even gotten to neuroplasticity. Maybe you could just share. I want to make sure we cover that before we have to end. Maybe, Maria, you could tell us something you do. Maybe you have a practice or 1 or 2 practices or just some tips, because sometimes that word sounds big. Growing your brain cells. It's not, I think, hint, it's not that, you're probably growing your brain cells, but just tell us some ways that you do grow your brain cells, because that's so important for kids for every age, so we can super age.
Okay, I'm going to preface it and break down. I just made some notes so I would not forget. So the cerebellum, for example, the back of our brains, contains 80% of the brain's neurons. And it primarily controls motor coordination. So we spoke about motor coordination, right?
Mm-hmm.
The center of the brain, which is a stratum, also facilitates movements and coordination. And that ties into diseases like Huntington's, Parkinson's, and it shows impairments, right? So we go from the middle of the brain to the ears is the motor cortex, which initiate and allow specific movements. And I'm just bulleting here so we can get a framework, right? The motor cortex controls movement of the hand. So naturally, movement is, as I mentioned earlier, movement of the hand is very significant, controlled by the motor cortex. So if movement is important and we spend most of our time in a sedentary position, think about it, in front of our computers, in front of the television, on the phone, we're sitting, we're sedentary. How will it impact our brains? It's a great possibility that that will occur, correct?
Right.
So changes in the way we live, to get to the answer of your question, changes in the way we live has progressively changed over the years, and increasingly so much more in recent years. Look at the past 2 years. That was like rapid. We have transitioned from outdoor activities, coming from the West Indies, being locked in a house, especially in the wintertime, if you live in a climate like New York. That's rapid change, culture shock. You're not used to being locked in. You're used to being outdoors. You're used to activities outdoors, gardening. Children have a responsibility. You know, you sweep up the yard maybe before you go to school. You're not just getting up and getting dressed and running off. You're helping with tasks. You're spending more time now in front of the television and using those electronic devices. So when connections now happen, if you look at the grandmother that's out there gardening, and people wonder, why is this person from Germany? Because they tend to have that thing where they garden, they're outdoors, they're gardening, compared to Americans, as I've seen. People from the West Indies, people from the Eastern countries, the African countries, China, those places, they garden. India, they will garden, and it's constant. It's a daily thing. They're doing farming, so they'll take the cows out to pasture, goats, pigs, whatever. Children have these responsibilities. Do you think that they are connecting? Why do you think they make great doctors? They see. They didn't study theory. They didn't read it in a book. They know exactly what it looks like to see a cow, a pig, a goat, see them sick and having to take care of the wound. They've seen them slaughtered. They've seen chickens in this country. And I hate to say it, most children probably don't know that a chicken is not parts. It has 2 legs with those feet, with the web feet. It has a beak. When it's going to rain, they coat themselves with that oil, the keratin. And when the rain falls, I watched this as a child. When it's raining, even if they're not in the coop, the water just rolls right off. If you don't see that and you hear it in theory, there's a different connection. You can explain till thy kingdom come. Understanding practical. So going out, look at this simple one, baking. There were times when people would get a recipe and they start from scratch with the flour, the sugar, the egg, the milk, the raisins, the currants, the everything that they need, and they put it all together And the children are there with them, and you get back home, Christmas is a big thing. They mix it, you help to mix all the batters, and at the end of everything, when they put everything in the pan, you get the bowl to lick the bowl. That's the best tasting thing, right? Here, what has happened? Transition. They make the box with the ingredients, and you pour in a container, you add the water or the milk, mix it up, you throw it in the oven. Where's the neural connections? Eggs. You don't have to crack the egg anymore. It's in a box. It didn't come from the chicken. And you pour the egg in the frying pan and you fry the pan, egg white, it's only egg white. What happened? So I said all that to say, I'm ranting because we need to give activities. If the child loves to draw, give them artwork. Don't hinder that creativity. If they love to crochet or they tell you they want to learn, they want to play an instrument, multiple instruments, don't say, I don't have the money. Figure it out, YouTube. So use what we have and pull them all together and make, we have a saying, I get back to the West Indian sayings, you take a lemon and you make lemonade, right? So you don't have, but you use the resources that you have. I see them use what we call hand cart back home, where they carry produce from the farm. Mm-hmm. And I've seen where they are so creative that they put a motor in it, go to the gas station, fill it up, and now they're driving it. Go figure. Mm-hmm. You can't afford a car, but you just got yourself a vehicle. And it's made from wood. Neural connections.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah.
I love all the things you said. I'm just going to recap: baking, gardening. There are things that I mentioned in the book. I don't have, here it is. The other book I wrote, I'll send you a copy, Maria. Karen's read it, or Super Ager. It has, we call it like a practice. A practice would be gardening, baking, especially if you do it in that calm, you're doing it calmly, mindfully, but you don't have to have all that words and thinking. It's just the way you do it. If you're doing it like, oh my God, I've got a garden, that's not it, right? Or, oh my God, I've got to bake something to have, or I'm going to pour these things in. It's like
a lifestyle.
Enjoying the process. Yeah. Being present. We don't say enough how that helps our brains, it helps our bodies. And I love that you brought the hands into it. I love so many of the things that you said today. And one thing I wanted to underline is I also heard resources, because sometimes we think, oh, I need to have a lot of money to do aging or living right. And what I noticed in my research for this book and my research on aging is it's actually sometimes places in the world where people don't have a lot of money, but they have resources, like they can garden, they can grow their own food. They have healthier food because they grow their own food, but they're not going to a grocery store and buying, like you said, the packaged, I'll just say cake mix or cookie mix, or even those already pre-made batter things. They're not as good for you. You don't get as much brain exercise. So just to recap that, or to emphasize that it's not always about the money, it's about the resources that we have. Resources meaning it could be nature, it could be the air, the water, the ground, and it's not necessarily the dollars.
And if I may interject, Elise, that's so important. It's behavior. It's, allowing our children, for example, to lead. We can bake cookies, and you have homeless shelters. You have senior citizens at home by themselves. I remember even as a child in Jamaica, that's when I was boarding, one of the things that we did on Sundays was that they prepared wonderful meals, and we would take it to the elderly people that, they're not in nursing homes, they live alone, or they're at home, right? And they know that we're coming. And so you'd have like 5 of us young girls go, and we would sing and read the Bible and have conversation and listen to them. And I find that we ignore the greatness in elderly people. they're sitting and a massive, knowledge is there waiting for them to give to us. And it's a us and them, and the separation and the value to be added there. So what we do largely contributes to how we regulate ourselves, our emotions, our activities, so those are things that not only as adults, so the adult plays the role of preparing and packaging the meal, for example. The children understand their role. You're going to walk up the hill, go left to Miss Johnson's house, Miss Webster's house, and they knock on the gate, make sure that they pull the dog in, whatever, all these things. And they walk you through the process, and you go, and these are the things you do. You help her set the table, you sit with her, and you spend the time. And I've been doing this even with the homeless shelter, and get the kids to be involved. And it becomes community service. It becomes something that they're creating their resume. It's connections, and they listen, they're learning, they're hearing stories that they would never see on TV. Things that the people have gone through. They're learning history that they would never read in the history book. This morning, at least, we learned some things from Guy that we would never hear.
Absolutely.
Experiences that we would never see and hear. We need to see the value. So the running, the walking, the knitting, the crocheting, the baking, the cooking, all of that, it regulates our mental health. It regulates the child's mental health. And it teaches appreciation. So that chemistry between us all, we were not made to be isolated.
Wow.
It brings us all together,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I could keep talking to you for so much more time, but we're going to have to jump off. And I really appreciate you excuse me, I'm losing my voice now at the end. Appreciate you sharing your wisdom, Maria, and hopefully we can have you back on again, because we didn't even touch so many different topics, so many things, and you bring such a rich perspective with the work you've done with your life experience. So I'd love to have you back on again. And we also mentioned Karen's podcast, which is Avoid the Maze. There's a whole network of podcasts that she produces. How to Superage is just one of them. Hopefully you're listening to How to Superage and getting lots of tips. Do you have any final words for us, Maria or Karen?
I will go before Karen, because yes. So final words. I would just encourage everyone to be conscious of you as a person. Be conscious of everyone around you. And don't hesitate to think or to question if you see a need, to service that need, because together we all accomplish more, and each one teaches one.
Maria, how can our listeners find you? Because you've got such wisdom. And as you talked about, you have to, we have to basically clone the idea. We have to keep it, and we have to keep it growing. So if somebody's listening to this and says, hey, what can I do? How can they reach you?
You can currently find me on Instagram. So it's mariaberry.coach. And my email address is Maria, BERTEACH @gmail.com. So it's Maria Burr Teach @gmail.com.
Wonderful. We'll make sure we get that in the show notes. So those of you who are listening, if you said, hey, I didn't catch it, just go read the notes and you can get in touch with Maria. And Elise always has her information there as well. And let's just make this a better world.
Absolutely. And I also want to give a shout out to Maria's wonderful monthly seminars where you can learn to speed read and learn to do speed math. They're for all ages, and they also support her work. So I recommend getting in on that, she can put you on the list. And I'm on the list and I attend whenever I can on Sundays. Thank you, Maria.
Thank you,
Thank you,
everybody.
Elise. Thank you.
Have a great day.